hit the record button, and I'm welcoming Amy Perry to It's Funny You Ask. Hi, Amy.
Morning.
How are you?
It's a Monday morning. Monday
Yeah,
morning after spring break. You know how fun it was getting all three of my kids up this Monday morning? They were
I,
super excited.
I actually do. I
Did
know.
you?
Yeah, and funny story. I left my driveway and it said 4 miles till E on my dashboard. Which, if you know me, this is nothing new. Like, if I had $1 for every picture that I have on my camera roll that said 0 miles till E, I would have a lot of money. But my kids have never experienced this before, and the one didn't care at all, but the other one was losing her collective shit a little bit about what was going to happen. So we had to like go over like worst case scenario. And at the end of it, we decided the worst case scenario was they would have a hilarious story and I would never get to live it down. So it really wasn't such a bad deal. But I did make it, not only to school, but then also to put gas in my car and make it home. And I live in Palo, so it wasn't like I was driving past a bunch of gas stations on my way. So yeah, I've had a Monday too. I got it. We're the same.
But she made it. So the universe is on our side, my girlfriend. We're surviving.
Yeah,
And
no kidding.
kids are all
What did
dropped off.
what did you guys do for spring break? Anything fun?
I still, so I teach at Coe and we didn't have a spring break. We rolled
Oh,
it throughout the semester. Yeah, so that's only for K through 12. So I was still working, but the kids were off. So my husband had taken some of the days off and I tried to step back for what I could. They went
yeah.
to their grandma's for the weekend. And honestly, as bad as this sounds, my husband and I had like a husband and wife weekend while the
Oh,
kids were while the kids were away.
I'm not sure why that sounds bad. My kids are my stepkids, so I get that every other weekend, and I really think having children with another mother is the way to do it.
You know, I think of was sometimes too of like the built-in, I don't want to say like free time, but like the alone time, the solo time it's a legit thing. So
The
the kids were
break.
having so much more fun at their grandma's house. I felt bad kind of like shipping them off for their spring break week, but we couldn't do a Florida trip like I think all of their friends were doing. And I'm like, well, gosh, I can't like suck too bad. Like I got to figure something out.
Yeah,
Uh,
I'm sure Grandma loves it too. I know.
yeah. So they
Yeah,
loved it. She loved it. We loved it. It was kind of a win-win.
yeah,
But we didn't go anywhere fancy. We didn't do any of that, but it was really nice some of those days that we did get
yeah,
out. And some of the days
yeah.
it was just plain old shitty outside, so we just kind of stayed in and bummed and did the things that we wouldn't normally do because we're all like kind of running from here to there and doing a different activity. So um, we as I look back, like we enjoyed it. Coming into this Monday morning was not maybe the telling the kids we could do a couple rounds of hide and seek last night at 9:30 was not the best idea. It solely promised that yes, and they're like, and my little 5-year-old, she's my youngest. She's such a she's not like my husband, especially, she's like wrapped on her finger. And she's like, come on, daddy, please. I haven't played it in so long. Please, I promise, I'll go right to bed. And he's like, oh, okay, just one round. And she goes, 5 rounds, daddy, 5. And he goes, no, no. She goes, oh, wait, two. He goes, no, no, I said one. And she goes, it's rock, paper, scissors, daddy. And she won it. So we did 2 rounds and that was it. And our dog plays and my 3 girls play. They're 5, 8, and 10. But I tell you what, they lied. Kendra, they lied to us. They're like, we will do those 2 rounds and we'll go right to bed because we know you let us stay up 2 hours later. They're liars. They were wound for sound, which I
It
reminded them this morning when they wouldn't get up. I'm like, just so you know, the next time, rock, paper, scissors, and those cute little blue eyes aren't going to do anything for you, honey.
Yeah, no kidding. Yeah, I gave you an inch. So I guess that actually gets me to my next question. I was going to say you have 3 kiddos. I knew they were all girls, but I didn't realize their age differences. So you've got one kind of entering preteen
Yes,
world.
yes.
We just got
Almost
through that.
11. I'm not ready, Kendra. I'm not.
You're not.
Mm-mm.
Mm-mm.
No, because
No.
I feel like the stage I'm entering is going to be with me for like the next 15 years as my kids all work through it. And then but really it's my husband who's like the poor husband, right? Because he's got his 4 women around and
It is so that transition from little girls to the preteen, like 10 to 12, wasn't. Now I have a 12-year-old and a 14-year-old, so we're just past where you're at. Um, and there's a huge change that happens, and it comes out of nowhere. Like one day they're still like cute and they like you, and the next day you only see the whites of their eyes, and you wonder how they're going to survive the next 5 years. And they're coming into their own, and like all the things that logically that they're going through, and I've said things to my kids that I remember my parents saying to me and thinking they were so dumb. It wasn't so long ago I was in your shoes. And I remember when my parents said it to me, I was like, it was like 100 years ago, you old fart.
Do they have color TV back then? Did they have TVs back then?
My kids call it back in the 19s. That's what they say.
In the 19s. That's not that long ago. Well, that's how we would respond, right?
Yeah, back in the old days. Back in the 60s. So yeah, raising girls. I grew up in a family of all girls. I have girls. I only have nieces, minus I have 2 nephews now, and they're both named Frank. So I have very little experience with boys. And I don't think raising girls is worse than boys by any means. Like I think it's weird when people want to like say one is better than the other. And I certainly wouldn't trade it, but there are interesting challenges as a woman raising women, trying to prepare them for all the things and empower them, and then also keep them humble at the same time.
It's interesting how we try to go out and speak this, and then I'm like, if someone were to look in my household, like what would they think? It's strong women, maybe know them, maybe raise them, maybe be them, and I'm like, oh, like Monday morning, the testament, right? Of like, seriously, dude, like get your ass out of bed, like we have to rock and roll. And
yeah,
it just is. It's the ever evolving.
Well, it's such a good point. Maybe that quote that we like to share. I like to share. I love it. But like the dirty details of knowing them, being them, and raising them are truly dirty details, I think.
We sure are. And I think about, so I've done a lot of work on my own spiritual journey over the last decade and kind of released a lot of the bullshit I had underneath the surface. And my daughter, who's 10, I can definitely see some of the things coming through in her, a lot of the very type A, like this is how it's going to be, like very, very logically oriented, and how it comes out between her and her sisters. And I feel like I have changed quite a bit from that to come more from like complete, like, part of the masculine side to more of a balance between masculine and feminine. But I see those come out and I'm like, oh my gosh, I taught her that. Like that's me coming through her. And
do you think though it's all taught, or do you think, I think, because I was that oldest kid with the same sort of the same
that
stuff.
That could be.
Yeah, I think some of it's just like ingrained in the person and they got to go through it. Do you think that we could save our daughters from like all of the things that we went through just by teaching them?
Some probably, but then there's that hard part too of knowing that you have to let them go through some of those so that they can be the strong people that they're meant to be too.
Yeah, right.
Mom, like we get to like we want to just bubble them, and because you think about some of the painful things too about a lot of times when you're telling other people, your sisters especially, of do this or do that, and sometimes too it's she's kind of looking to me to be like, yeah, you got this, girl. So some of it I do think I would like to, I know they have to go through that, and it's hard to watch as a mom. Some of it I do think I could, I mean, I think any of us could, right? Where you get home at the end of the day, you're just exhausted. What you're putting out in energy is just not your best. And they pick up on that though too, right? And so then I think, okay, yep, that's definitely me what I'm putting out. And then I kind of mull on that for a while. I'm like, I could have handled that better. But then it's also that's part of being human. We're all part of the human club, and we're meant to experience those things and then sift through them.
Yeah, it is. And I was just thinking about this because you're speaking at the U conference and you're telling your story about your story has, I'm sure, if like 10 years ago you, 5 years ago you, 2 years ago you, 1 year ago you made predictions about what life would be like, you certainly wouldn't be where you are now, which is true of all of us, I think. Like we set out plans and we set out goals and they shift and change, and then we end up in a place that we wanted to be, or maybe a place that we didn't know we wanted to be. And it's like kind of pivoting with all of that. And but you telling your story and all of your pivots and the things that have come of it is part of like the magic of U conferences, people telling their stories, their struggles, their triumphs, their overcome. And then like at the same time, here we are raising all of these girls and we want to protect them from the struggles, but at the same time, without them, what would our stories be? What do you think of that?
It's definitely walking a fine line.
Yeah, it
You're
really is.
exactly
I hadn't
right.
thought about that till just
Be
now.
where we were. For so long, I was so angry at the culture and what I was raised in. And you think of it, females especially, right? Like, this is how you should look. This is how you should act, especially the body image. I think the body image for me was probably just a really big kicker, never feeling like you're enough and getting very angry at what I was taught growing up, not just from one person in one place, but I just think that dynamics in general. Then I think about what I've overcome from that, what I have learned, and how strong I have become as an individual in that was a necessity. If you were just given everything and put in a bubble, you're not going to get to that point. You're not going to appreciate how strong you are and what you really and truly can do. And really, it's not even always just a strength. It's just understanding and knowing who you are. Mm-hmm. Because there's so much soul searching. There's so much like digging beneath the layers, and that shit. That's like, that is some hard. That's the hard digging that we do on that. But at the end of the day, it's looking at them as opportunities to grow and to evolve and to love more deeply. And I try to look at it from that focus, and then it evades the rest, or it definitely circumcedes the rest of all of it.
Yeah, my husband and I think the biggest difference between raising little girls and raising young teenagers is giving them the rope to hang themselves. We talk about this all the time. When they were little, you make so many of their decisions for them. And I remember when they were small, even when I gave them choices, like there wasn't a wrong choice, right? Like I would be like, do you want to wear the purple shirt or the pink shirt? And I would say like things like that, like not what shirt do you want to wear, because then that would have a 4-year-old, God knows, when we're never leaving the house is what would happen, So as they're getting older, as they get older, like you empower them to make their own choices and to take what you've taught them. And what's so disappointing to me is how many times I'm like, man, didn't I teach you that? And they still, they really still have to go through like their own thing. And it's just like, I mean, that like the boundary gets different as they get older. And, like the weirdest thing for me with teenagers is that they suffer consequences that are not from me, school, teachers, from their choices that they make. And then, consequences for not making the right choices or, being out of integrity of like not getting to participate in a sport or having a lower grade and, all of those things. And you kind of let them, and, in junior high, you really let them go through it. But I think, gosh, in high school, like you could make choices to affect your whole life and there's nothing I can do about it.
Sometimes you sit back and you watch helplessly.
Yeah, I would say that's the hardest part. And I suppose you're probably seeing like a lot of that with your oldest right now, like those little things kind of starting to come to play.
She's trying to figure it out. And so she has some friends that are a couple years older in the neighborhood. Great kids, but you can definitely see the difference even in just 2 grade levels or 2 years of age, right? And she's just trying to find herself of, what am I, who am I? And I think we all go through that at that stage too of we feel very vulnerable with who we truly are. And is it going to be cool? Is it going to be accepted? Is that how I should be? And it's just kind of walking their line on that. And
trying to fit in with the cool kids.
Yeah, or just the older kids, and then it's then she'll come down and play with friends that are her sister's age, and so it's just a little bit of both. And I do like to see the weaving back and forth, but yes, you do. You definitely sit back and you can kind of see those wheels turning on the inside, and I was a youth counselor for 5 years, and it was for high school kids. And that, I
Oh,
think
wow.
when I was that, my kids were so really little, so I had like no inkling of like what to expect coming in. But honestly, those were some of the best experiences and the best memories that I have. But I can definitely say you kind of sit back and you watch helplessly, where I should say helplessly, like you feel like you're trying to empower them. You feel like you're trying to give them the tools to make a good decision, but ultimately it is up to them. And but once you can get in the in with them, when you're around them long enough, and several of the kids that I was with from like ninth grade to 12th grade, and we had gone through a trip to Colorado and climbed a mountain and gone to the East Coast and done these things. So you get that far, and they kind of let you in a little bit, at least when you're on the trips. And then when you get back, they kind of all that is non-existent. It's like what happens in Vegas stays in Vegas. Like what happens on trips with the youth, like we don't. So, we'll come back from the trip and they'll be like, the best part was talks on the mountain with Amy, because we would just sit down and just let's just talk the shit, like what's going on. And these are these junior girls, 17-year-old girls, just pouring their heart out on what they're experiencing, what they're feeling, and it is heartbreaking to like hear what they're going through, but knowing that you're there to help them along the way of like, okay, well, what's another way you could see that, or helping to shift that perspective for them, but knowing that they ultimately own it. But
Yeah.
it's still a beautiful thing to be part of it, right? To say, well, hopefully my positive perspective on it, or a different perspective, will help them shift that, right? Because when they're so inundated with all of the other teenagers, that's the only perspective that they're seeing. And of course, sometimes they're just not gonna talk to mom, right? Because it's their mom, and I expect my kids are going to be the same way. That's okay. Have that neutral source that can kind of really get in there and make a difference.
Yeah, I didn't realize you had so much experience working with different age kids because, like, kind of to go backwards. So, your career, you've worked in a lot of different things, and you mentioned earlier, like your spiritual journey, and I assume that's part of what you're going to talk about with your talk. So I don't want you to overlap too much of that and give too much of that away, but feel free to speak on whatever you want. But you so now I know. Well, now you're working in the college in at co-college, right?
Yep.
So you've got students that are college age students, and then you've worked as a high school counselor, which, dear God, so wow, that's something. And you mentioned this trip thing. I just signed up to go on a bus trip to Florida with my niece's high school this winter. So I've done this before, so I know what I'm diving into, and it's so excited. No, but anyway, that I digress on that. And then you've got your own experience as a woman growing up through life, and then with your daughters, lots of perspective on women, what they go through, and how they kind of grow through what they go through, huh?
Oh, I love that phrase. You grow through what you go through, and
I
that you
heard
grow
that
through it.
somewhere. That wasn't from me, but I heard that somewhere. I just don't know where.
I'm holding on to that. I'm gonna write that up, because that's a really good way to remember those things.
Yeah, well, it is. And you mentioned that it's so hard when you're listening to people that maybe sometimes younger than you in age, but maybe just at a different maturity level than you are in self-development, or in any sort of like development of any kind. So whether that means like younger, older, or whatever, it's so hard to not, like, a lot of, like, to look at them and be like, oh, well, that's just because you're young, you'll get over it, or your problems really aren't that bad because you really haven't experienced life yet. I know with my niece who's 16, sometimes she tells me about her problems, and I'm just like, oh honey, they're just not. I don't say that, but that's my first thought. How do you What's your advice on that, with all of your experience on being a listening ear for somebody and helping them
I
through?
say definitely the listening, but meet them where they are.
Oh, yeah,
You
that's
have to
good.
meet them where they are, because if you're speaking at it from, I don't even want to go from like here to here, because it's not the better than, it's just because we all have different experiences. But if you're here and they're here, like there's not going to be that meeting ground of them to be able to understand or bring in your perspective on that, right? You just So meeting them where they are really helps connect the two of you, so that you can align with, you're definitely not in their headspace, but you can get a little bit closer than if you're like, oh, well, this is what I think, because that's a lot of times what they want to hear that a little bit, but sometimes they just want to be heard.
Yeah, well, and if you've already, and if you're like further along maturity wise or through a journey, or, I don't know if I'm speaking those words correctly, but hopefully you know what I mean.
Yes.
If you're further along, then you have the capability of backing up and meeting them where they are versus expecting them to fast forward and
Yes. Yeah.
understand your perspective, right?
They can't do that, right? They haven't had the experience. That said though, like maturity and being further along, as I look into the perspective of my 5-year-old, and I'm like, oh, but clearly she doesn't have the experience and that, quote unquote maturity from how we perceive things as humans. But how often I wish I could just go back and be present in the moment like she is. Truly just present in the moment. And I feel like if we could all take a step back to that stage, it would be a very positive impact too, because sometimes we get so like ingrained of like, well, I've done this and I've done that and experience is fantastic, but we often forget about the enjoyment of the little things too, of just being present with life. That my 5-year-old teaches me so much of that, and even my older kids. But I think they've even gotten to the stage at 8 and 11 that their perspectives have shifted too, especially my 10-year-old, as we were talking about the preteen stuff. But my 5-year-old, she has not a clue. She's a hurricane in the house. Like she can't clean up for herself worth a damn. And she makes a mess in every room that she walks in and can like destroy it in 10 seconds flat and move on to the next. Like that's not where I'm looking to go back. But like how she sees the world, she just true unconditional love.
Right.
I mean, she'll kick her scissors and she'll do that stuff, but just the love that still emanates from her is it's pretty inspiring.
Yeah,
I give and take.
Yeah, I mean, it doesn't matter if it's 9:30 at night, she'll negotiate another rock, paper, scissors because that's the moment she's living in right now, right?
And she's a food thief. They all are. Like, I don't know. They must have gotten this from their dad. I don't know. Like they'll go down after we put them to bed, sneak into the pantry. I don't know how many once frozen waffles I find underneath her bed. Like she sneaks down, grabs a frozen waffle and takes it back to her room. And then I don't know if she like falls asleep eating the thing or if it's just this game that they have of like the thrill of like sneaking down the stairs to get some food. Like you get those kid locks that you try to put on the doors, but really they know how to work all of those. It's mommy who like can't get in the damn door. Like how do I finagle this when you're trying to get something? But yeah, we were just cleaning out her room this past week, and I was like, what in the world is this? Or all three of them, or they'll have like candy wrappers and slime. That we can't. Like slime is like the bane of my existence. But all the beads that are in like the bathroom floor. But I tell you what, none of them ever do it.
No.
Who was it? Wasn't me. It's not her bringing in frozen waffles underneath her bed. You know who always gets the blame on that? This little guy. It's always the dog. It's him. Poor Peyton puppy. He's always the one that's stealing those waffles. He is one talented dog. He can open up the freezer. He can get the thumbs. He always gets the blame for everything from the kids. And I mean, they will, and that's the thing with the 3 kids, right? Because they can easily, they're like pointing at each other. And at some point, I just lock myself in my room and put myself in timeout and let them figure it out.
No kidding. Tell us a little bit about your journey the last few years of you've kind of been like, it's been really, it's been interesting to watch because I think that I mean, the idea of being an entrepreneur and quitting your day job and working and all of that, or working for yourself is a dream a lot of people have, and it's not one that works out all the time. And not that it doesn't always have to work out for right now, but it doesn't always work out the way you think it's going to. And you've been very transparent about your journey through reaching those goals and have kind of had to ebb and flow and pivot along the way. And I would love to know some of your perspective on, well, first of all, tell people that don't know you about Shine Your Light and what you are building with that. And then, kind of where you see that going, have pivoted back to working in the corporate world. But I'm assuming Shine Your Light's not gone, right?
That's no,
yeah, okay.
Not at all.
I didn't think so. As I was talking just now, I was like, wait a minute, that's not over. Okay.
It's not. It's not. It has pivoted. It certainly has. So when I think about my journey, especially in the last decade or so, where I was just feeling so, I had everything going for me, and I still do. But it was like I had a great family, I had a great house, I had a great job, like everything. I'm like, but why? I just felt unfulfilled. It was like, why can I not why can I not just enjoy what I have in front of me? It was like something was missing, and tried going through all of the things, you know, it was the eating, it was the drinking, it was these things of like trying to find fulfillment in something external, and nothing worked. And it wasn't until I started to really delve inward of realizing that it was a nudge from my soul, the universe, your inner self, that little girl inside, like whatever phrase you want to use for it, but we all have it. And I think we all know what it is. And realizing that's what I had been neglecting.
That
That's
little
when
nagging thought in the back of your head that just
no,
never shuts
it
up.
doesn't go away. And honestly, so it's a little bit there, but it's a lot here. It's a lot more in like your belly of just like feeling like, gosh dang, like should be different. Like I should be feeling more. What am I missing? And at that point, I had been in corporate America for probably a decade, for probably about 10 years.
What were you
Maybe
doing? Remind me.
I was in accounting and finance. So I've done different things over in corporate America, but always in the numbers. Always some kind of numbers. I've done taxes. But at one point, I loved what I did. Even when I left corporate America almost 2 years ago, I still really liked what I did. It wasn't that at all. But as I was going through my journey and uncovering things from within, it was what I had been neglecting within myself. It was like, oh my gosh, I started to fill that void inside. And I was becoming more aware of what I had been missing, what the stories, at least I had been holding on to that were just totally untrue. But it becomes a cycle of I'm not enough. I'm not pretty enough. I'm not the right size. I'm not making enough. So and so is, climbing the ladder faster than me. Somebody else's kids are way cuter and they're doing way more fun things, and I'm not a good enough mom. Like, those stories are endless that we fill ourselves, but our mind, like, we all have those minds that chatter, and that chatter oftentimes is horrible. Like, we say things to ourselves that are worse than anything we would ever, like, we talk about, how mean other people are to us, and like, well, they're jerks. Well, oftentimes we're a complete asshole in our own head of the things that we tell ourselves. Like, we would never tell somebody else that you get up in the morning, you look in the mirror and you're like, oh. But it's not just on looks, but it's our whole beings. And breaking down those stories and releasing those was so freeing. And as I looked at my peers in corporate America and so many young moms trying to do all the things, right? They're working, they're trying to make a career for themselves, having young families, having the dynamics within their own families and siblings and parents and spouses, and trying to figure out how to maintain their own identity in all of this. Most of the times we just kind of forget about our own identity and we become so-and-so's coworker and, Janie's mom or so-and-so's wife. Like, we just forget about who we are, and put emphasis on that. And I wanted to share it. It was like I wanted to share that with the world of like, oh my gosh, this is amazing. Like, it's not that life wasn't messy, but it was very empowering as I started to walk through and realize like it was up to me, and I was able to fill that nudge somewhat, but it came from within. There was nothing external that was going to satisfy that.
Wow.
So that started it. It was realizing, and then once you become aware of it within yourself, I was like, oh my gosh. And then just talking about it with my friends. And for so long, I thought something was wrong with me, that I was just so wounded, like I was so broken. And you talk to your friends and it's not that case at all. Like, we're all walking wounded. We're all walking with our own stories, with our own experiences, and holding on to all this stuff that's really not serving us.
Yeah.
Serving us very well, I should say. So that's where Shine Your Light really started to take form is, well, what can we do? If we have this choice, or if we're in, so many of us, I mean, I think it's just the name of the game these days, right? There's all the commercials, everything you see is like, well, you can fix your problems, just take this, or, eat this or do that. And I think that there's not necessarily those are bad things, but if you don't kind of reach inside and figure things out for yourself of what serves you, you're missing the boat.
Yeah.
So back to corporate America, I still liked what I did. I loved who I worked with, seeing that a lot of us were struggling with the same things. And I moonlighted as starting to do speaking on the side, workshops, retreats, to really just help us feel that, like, that we could go and do the things to stop holding ourselves back. What are the assets? What are the skills? What are the gifts that we have to share with the world? And let's use them.
Yeah.
At some point, so that I was moonlighting that for a few years. Universe was guiding me to step away from corporate America, and that is one scary thing to do. I mean, that was what I had known for 14 years.
You were very transparent about leaving corporate America and jumping into this business of helping women through through the same thing you've been through, basically. At least that's
It,
my
yeah,
understanding.
it was just
And
getting out and talking about it. It was just talking about it so that that's the, I think that's the biggest healing for all of us, right? Is so often we just kind of work through our things alone, or we try to go through alone and don't realize that everybody else is going through the same thing on their own journey and in their own path, but something similar of just trying to find their way and live to their highest potentials, but just trying to find how. So that was probably the biggest leap of faith that I had taken, was actually just step away. And interestingly enough, I had been teaching college adjunct for a couple years at that point. So I taught at night. I was a youth counselor at night. So I've been doing all these things on the side, and I loved them, but I was ready to just take them full force. But it is scary to just kind of step away from, it's not that I hated it. I couldn't walk away and be like, oh my gosh, I'm so free. Like I hated my job. I hated my boss. That wasn't true at all. I liked everything and I loved the people I worked with. But realizing that that's not the end, that's just a change in your story. You're just going on to a new chapter. And I almost saw it as like I was a bird in a bird cage, and it was a really posh bird cage. I loved it. Like it was, it was made good money and I was comfortable and I knew my job and I was set up. I felt completely supported in corporate America and I was going up and doing the things. Nothing was wrong with it. It was this posh bird cage. Like I was living the dream, right?
that's a
Until
great
somebody opened the
analogy.
door. Somebody opened the door to that bird cage.
I
And I'm
love
like,
that analogy. And in the birdcage, you can see what all your hopes and dreams are.
yeah. And you open the door and you're like, wait, well, what's out there? Well, what is that? And so for so long, I just stood at the door of the birdcage. I'm like, well, that, like all of a sudden your world like this went like ever expanded. And so I kind of like stood on the end of the birdcage for a while, being like, can I do it? And eventually I just had to take the jump and the leap. And in late 2019, I did that. And I'll tell this more in my story, but it's how things have unfolded. I never, ever could have imagined. At that point, I thought I was going to take Shiny Light full time. And I did for a little while, full time. Well, and this was like right before COVID had hit too. So not knowing what 2020 was going to look like. But I also had this huge passion for teaching. And so I just I started to get in my own head of what a lot of the comforts of what I had in corporate America of just, you go in, you know what you're going to do, you know what you're going to expect, but there's a lot of vulnerabilities. Things come to the surface when everything just changes. And that's not that it's bad, but you're so far out of your comfort zone that you find that there's some inner work of, well, what's driving me, what's going on. And at that point in time, Co had reached out. And it's something that had been a dream of mine for a while. And thinking that I would be taking Shiny Light full time, and that was going to be my perspective of working with people not necessarily my age, but similar experiences. And that was my mission. And the universe is saying, oh, well, that is some, but I'm being called right now to work even more with the college age students to help them launch and branch into their own journeys and their own stories, and bringing actually life purpose and vocation work into the college ground. And so that is
Well,
where I'm at
I
now.
mean, that's gotta be great for people that, I mean, you went through learning numbers, and all I know about learning numbers is that it sounds terrible and dreadful. But I bet there's very little like um, talk about things like burnout and the emotional side of working in a high pressure career. And you don't even have to tell me. I know you address those things with your students. Like I just know it's in your nature to help them understand that. So what a gift for them. And you must really have like a real passion to teach, because coaching is another form of teaching,
Mhm.
and Shine Your Light is a coaching program that you run. So to be clear, in case we weren't, that I think you must learn so much that you're able to apply to your Shine Your Light business while you're teaching, and vice versa.
Yes. I think we try to separate all of these things, but it's how we show up in life in general, because college really shouldn't just be the academic route. It should not just be what you're learning inside those four walls. And I think that has been the perspective for so long. And I think that's actually been what's been taught. But where Co is at, and I think a lot of other colleges are starting to really start ingrain and bring this more to the norm, is understanding that vocation, understanding what the community aspect, what footprint are you going to make on the world? Not just in if you're great at numbers, if you're great at lab work, if you're great at science, if you're great at music, but holistically as a person, what are you bringing to the table?
Yeah.
And that is, I think, where um, I have hands down, like, just no doubt that that's where I'm being called to go, right? Like, that's the niche I'm stepping in to help build out at Co. And so it's great. It's really great for the enmeshment. So I was doing a workshop, a women's retreat this weekend for Shine Your Light. And it was just interesting. I was like, well, how am I gonna, I've been working with college students. How do I weave the stories in? But it went so seamlessly because at the end of the day, we're all humans. We're all on, we have, so yes, our experiences are different in the extent of like what we're going through, but the same idea of what we're learning and trying to evolve. And at the end of the day, we're all pro humanity. And so how do we come together with the gifts that we have to make that better? And
Well,
all of us have that.
think about when we joined the workforce. And by the way, I assume everyone I talk to is my age. So if you're not my age and you're much, much younger, then just forgive me, but I'm sure you'll understand regardless. Um, when I entered the workforce, it was I did not finish college, but if you did, regardless if you did or not, you get your training and you go to work and you show up early and you do your job and you do extra work and then you go home and then and you start all over again. And there was no excuse for there was no room for any feelings, emotion of any kind. And almost like once you entered the work doors, everything gets left behind and you leave it outside and you pick it up when you leave if you need to. And there has been quite a shift. And I would say, between baby boomers and millennials, that shift of humanity in the workplace has really come full circle. I can only imagine where it's going. But if we're not teaching those things in college, I think it's funny, we all struggled at that age, at all ages, but I mean, we all can relate to the struggles of someone in their early 20s. And the fact that they're, basically just like figure it out kid. I'm glad we're past that or we're moving past it anyway.
Yeah, definitely old energy, old paradigm is and you explained it so perfectly. You get in, you sit in your seat, like you leave the other parts of your life at the door. Definitely the way that it used to be. I know for sure that that's how it was with my parents when, and it wasn't, you didn't even have to like your job. It was a paycheck. Like, you didn't see near as much of people shifting jobs as like, you just go in and do it as your job. Like, doesn't matter if you like it. For now, times are shifting. We're like, well, no, if you show up with passion, you show up with purpose, like you bring so much more to the table, both at your job and then in life and in the world. And we are realizing that. And that I think is a lot of the reason why I'm where I am now is in corporate America. I did a lot of mentoring with incoming graduates and not even as a formal supervisor. Generally, I wasn't, but I loved having the informal mentoring to be able to meet with them, see how things are going. And I was just blown away at them walking in the door and saying, well, what's your company doing to help me keep work-life balance? What's your company doing for the community? And it's not like it's pushing back, but it's challenging. It's saying, I need this as part of my life and it's important.
Well, if you spend half
that.
of your waking hours at work and the other half of your waking hours, you're like getting ready for work or you're driving home from work and you're, thinking about what you're doing for work, you should have opportunities to be passionate about what you do. Hating your job, even if it doesn't matter what your job is. You could be putting, trinkets together in a factory. You could be working fast food. You could be working, as an entrepreneur. You could be working in corporate America, higher education, whatever. I think the opportunity to come together and give back and do good for others in the workplace, it makes going to work a whole hell of a lot nicer, I think.
So much better. So much better. And I just feel like I don't think you can really put words around it, but the world now just seems like it's so divisive. Like you have to believe it's black or white, you believe one or the other. And we're finding so many ways to argue about how we're different or how we're right and how we're wrong. And I think coming out of 2020 was just a huge eye-opening. You have politics, you have COVID, you have all of these changes in our social settings of just kind of just feeling like we're hunkered down and I don't even say hibernation, but isolation, where we just have different dynamics that having those skills or having those aspects just brought to the table to really help us come together and share in the stuff that we don't like, and share in the stuff of like, oh my gosh, like think about what's going, climate change is huge, and what we're seeing. And Rachel for us was just complete devastation, right? And that just hurts our hearts. I mean, every day we drive by that, and it still weighs heavy. And it's like, we are social beings, we're emotional, we're mental beings. Like, how are we taking care of ourselves, and how are we opening up to that and embracing that, and not just pretending like you walk in the door and all that shuts off and you do your work, because that's just not how it really is. And
Yeah, how much better can you do your work if you know you can be like, hey, I need a mental health hour.
And that's huge, so huge.
And I can't even imagine what you bring, because to the table for students too, because a lot of what you hear people complain about in the corporate world when new grads come is that they learn the things that they learn in school, but so much has to be taught out of school, because a lot of the people that taught them have no real world experience. And that ends up being a problem. And I'm sure you can see all of that, like inside, outside, in academia, out of it. Like, I'm sure the arguments are far and wide, but what a gift to be able to give people that experience, and then to hopefully make a real impact on how people view their jobs, how they look for employers, how hopefully how employers look for great employees, because I think we're all assets to each other, where old thinking was the employer is like the king, and the employee is the minion, and it's not an equal asset, where I think now we're in a place of really that like equal place of
a lot of collaboration. Absolutely. And I think Shine Your Light has shifted some from my original mold of just looking at mostly women with kids, or earlier on, and actually earlier in the, as they're building their careers, but trying to find ways that they could bring passion and purpose into their life and still have the careers. Or if they want to shift out, a lot of mine is do the thing that you want to do. What is it that you want to do? Because we've so far forgotten it or not paid attention to that. Maybe that's starting your own business. Maybe that's just getting out and taking a painting class once a week so that you can do something that you're passionate about and be purposeful about it. But realizing that Shine Your Light is more than that. There's a kid walking across the street. My dog is very much saving us right now. We're all good. I think we're going to survive. But I lost my train. Oh gosh. My grandma used to say, bye-bye, it's gone.
I understand that too, 100%. I know right where you are.
Good thought too. I think it's a good thought. Oh, but so Shine Your Light's expanding. So it's not just about people that were looking like my experience, like what I've gone, my current chapter is, and where I've done a lot of my growing spiritually and just as myself, but from the college age students, where what we can help, the skill sets and tools that we can give them too. And I just love it. I never would have guessed. And I fought this so much, Kendra. I had this idea of this is what Shine Your Light is going to be. I left corporate America. I'm like, this is what it is. I had a whole structure set up of like, I'm going to do this coaching. And really, I was focused more on workshops and going into businesses and speaking to women in business and saying, okay, what are you doing to show up for yourself? Which ultimately is helping the world, right? But you have to heal yourself first. I had the whole plan made up, and the universe kept saying, well, no, we want you, pulling me here, all the signs coming in of and doing this and doing that. I'm like, well, no, this is what I have. Like, universe, like, I got this. And the pull was just strong enough, and I just have to surrender. And here I am. And I'm like, oh my gosh, this is amazing. I can't tell you exactly where Shine Your Light is headed. It's still very much alive, but it has shifted. I mean, and COVID's done some of that too, right? We're not going in and doing, you can't do on-site workshops and such, and load. If I put another Zoom like meeting on somebody's calendar for doing a workshop, like it's just not the same, but still very much alive, just taking a different direction. And I'm excited to kind of see where we're gonna weave in the next year or two.
Have you felt like you have really relaxed on your ability to pivot through all of this?
Yeah. I think a lot of that too was shifting some from my masculine energy of like, this is how it's going to be. This is where my validation comes in. So much of it was I felt so, my ego got in the way after I left corporate America because I told everybody this is what I'm going to do. And I go, gosh, if I tell them that like I'm not doing what I told them I was going to do and I went this direction instead, are they going to think that I'm a failure? So there was a lot to work through and that to be like, well, no, you're just maneuvering through life and figuring it out as you go, just like everybody else. And that's the pivot. That's seeing, surrendering and just going with the ebb and the flow. So much easier to pivot now, just releasing those
At the end of
expectations.
the day, has anybody looked at what you've done with Shine Your Light and said, well, Amy, this is great, but you said you were going to do this, so you're a failure in my eyes.
Just this guy up here, right? That mental tool, that one that will tell you all those stories.
Yeah, damn it.
Just gotta tell her to sit down and shut up sometimes.
Yeah, I mean, it
Yeah.
really is true. Like all of that judgment that we think other people are putting on us, it's really the judgment we're putting on ourselves.
Yeah.
And I think that is, and it just touched on something I'm talking a lot about this week at the conference, is that we're not really afraid of vulnerability, but we're afraid of judgment. And we say we're afraid of judgment of others, but I don't think that's it.
Liar. Like we're liars. But until you really get in and dig underneath the surface and work through that, you're like, oh.
Yeah.
And you're so right. But how freeing is it if we could just step away from that and realize like nobody else is judging us? Why are we? Like we wouldn't.
Yeah. Easier said than done, which is why some of those retreats and coaching programs or, opportunities to come together at a conference and like, have like-minded thoughts and ideas gel together with other people, because it seems to be that, you could read all of the quote boxes that you want and all the inspirational words and all the books and all the things, but it gels differently when you start to like see the heads nodding in the room, when you're able to share experiences and share your stories and come together with that on common ground. And I mean, I think that really is the magic of being able to tell your story. And I love how transparent you've been able to be. I'm sure a lot of that's been hard. I'm sure you've not been as transparent as like what I think you're you're probably like, oh no, girl, I didn't say half of what went on, behind the scenes.
You got me, Kendra, you got me.
Yeah, I mean, it's true of all of us,
Yeah, that's just it, right?
Yeah.
And that's where we realized, and I totally agree, that getting together in the conferences, like you realize like, wow, she is me. And like we are she, like we're all like that. So if we're all like that, you kind of take that judgment off of yourself. You lessen the power that your inner judgment has.
Yeah,
right.
That's for sure. That is for sure. Well, I am so glad you shared all this. I love talking about those kids and the journey of trying to raise these strong girls. I mean, it's interesting. You can't help but wonder what would be different if our moms were collectively kind of like, I feel like we are now, or maybe it's just the circles I'm in, we're able to embrace that in the same way. It was a different time, and embracing that certainly got you called a hippie in my mom's time, which wasn't flattering, I don't think. I mean, it was to some of them, I think. They were like,
I don't know. I hear bell bottoms are coming back though, right? Because they hate our skinny jeans.
They do. Listen, but I don't know.
I saw your parted hair. I mean, girlfriend, don't give in, friend. Don't give in.
It was not meant for me. Oh, that middle parted hair was not good. I did that in public with my kids, and they're like, "Oh my God, stop it, stop it!" Like, please.
I try to be like, I don't want to say hip with my students, but I think I'm trendy. I think I'm modern. I'm like, I wonder what my students think of me, like of my clothes, like because I'm like, I think I'm trendy. Like
Sometimes the high schoolers in my life tell me I'm trying too hard. And on YouTube, they tell me that I have the anti vibes that they like. So I don't know if I'm being insulted or not. Some people they use words I don't understand. Like, I have become my mother. I've had to be like, okay, listen, I'm old and I Googled this and I still don't know what you said.
I've done an Urban Dictionary is like, I'll be on like the youth trips. I'm like, okay, what they just said this. What does it mean?
Yeah, so weird. And I remember my parents being these weird old people. And it was just like one day I was a weird old person, but I don't care either. I'm also like, well, you guys talk like idiots, so it's not my problem. Just like
It's
my
a you
mom said,
thing.
yeah, I talk like Beavis and Butthead, and I thought it was hilarious. And
And now like they just don't get the references. Like
no,
if you walk in there and say like I need TP for my bunghole, like they would just look at you like you're just playing weird. I'm like, that's really funny for so many years. They probably don't even know what MTV is.
no, it's totally different. It's totally different. Anyway, yeah. Well, thank you so much for being on. This has been a great conversation, and I'm really excited to hear you tell your story. I think it's long overdue, and I think it was the right time for you to share your story too. I think you're going to inspire a lot of people, and I really love the perspective of, we certainly are a conference for women in business or women business owners, but it's not just women entrepreneurs, and it's certainly women that just want a little bit more, or they want to step into their own, into leadership, have a clear mind, feel good about themselves every day, and work and feel purpose. And that can happen in any workplace. It's not just working for yourself. In fact, I don't recommend it for everyone. It's terrible some days.
But doing it's because we're each different in that sense, but I think each of us kind of having more of that purpose in our lives, well, you never know where the next step is going to be though, right? It's just going to open those doorways for you,
Yeah,
figure out more about you, and let the universe lead the way. But I'm so excited. I am just pumped to
yeah.
speak with
You
everybody on when.
actually get to kick it off. You get to be our first.
That's right.
I never tell people, like, I just put the schedule out, and then I just hope they don't like message me and be like, what the hell?
You know that inner judgment that you were talking about? Sit down, like,
Yeah.
be quiet in there.
Don't worry. I think you're gonna knock it out of the park, and we were really excited to see your application. So thanks so much for being here.
Yeah, I will see everybody very soon. Very soon.
Yeah, Wednesday. All
Yeah.
right. I am gonna.
I will enjoy the rest of the Monday. I'm glad that you're able to get gas, because that was kind of a funny story.
For sure.